welcome to week 2 of our 40-day prayer adventure. Draw the circle. I'm really excited. Today is March. What is today? Today is March 13th, Wednesday. A very cold, wintry day today, but it's a great day nonetheless. So if you are counting along with us, today, March 13th, is day 7 in your reading. So if you're meeting on a different day than today, just kind of do the math there a little bit. Hey, just a couple of words of encouragement before I let Mark kind of take over here. We started handing out some prayer bookmarks that we would love for you to kind of put inside your prayer journals and your reading and refer to them. And these are the prayer goals that the elders have been praying about for 2019 and specifically our 40 days. But we don't want you to stop praying for them after 40 days. We want you to continue to pray day 41, 42, 43, and so forth. And these are, this took some great wrestling. We as the elders spent some time really processing through these prayer requests. And it really comes down to this week. As you're reading in this week's section of devotionals, Mark's really going to challenge us to be dreaming big and taking big leaps of faith and really daring to believe God for amazing stuff. And so I'm going to go ahead and put these up on the screen just so that you can see them here as I read them. So here are the 7 prayer goals. 1, pray that the elders would boldly follow Christ as he leads us to both deep and wide. Now, we've been talking about that as a community, that we want to grow deep in our individual relationships, but we also want to grow wide in our influence, bringing other people to faith. Number 2, pray specifically for Tower 21 that God would expand its influence and its services. For those of you who don't know, Tower 21 is a sister organization that we launched about 11, 12 years ago, which focuses on people in recovery and reentry. So people who are trying to find a life without drugs or alcohol or whatever their addiction is, as well as people who are re-entering society from some sort of incarceration, prison, jail, work release, those sorts of things, right? Number 3, that God would birth 5 new ministries within our community. That's pretty amazing prayer. We have lots of wonderful ministries, and birthing 5 new ones, that's pretty big, all right? Here we go. Number 4, that God would bring 50 people to faith in Jesus Christ. 50 brand new believers in faith. That's what we're hoping for. That's what we're praying for. That's what we're circling. That God would just blow open the doors for evangelism and people coming to faith for the very first time in 2019. All right, number 5, that our community would become so irresistible that we have standing room only on Tuesdays and Fridays. Wow, now that's a bold prayer, and I'm really excited about it. The thought, first of all, we've been using this word irresistible. A lot of people don't come to church because they don't find any purpose or reason for it. It's resistible. We want to create such a community that is so loving and so irresistible that people can't help but come. To have standing room only on a Tuesday and Friday night, that's a bold prayer, and I'm believing God for it. All right, here we go. Number 6, that 25 new people would begin serving in ministry. The truth is, guys, our faith doesn't really explode until we start giving it away in service, right? Jesus says if you cling to your life, you'll lose it, but if you give it away, then you'll find it. Service and giving your faith away by serving in ministry is an unbelievable step. It's where my faith really took off, and we're believing 25 new people to step into that. All right, and finally, number 7, that God would provide an additional $25,000 for technological advances. We have some dreams, technological dreams, not only for our online community and doing a better job with that. By the way, it's amazing how many people watch those videos. But also, we have some advancements that we want to do inside our building. And we're believing and hoping for God for $25,000. And actually, the elders and I, we had this amazing discussion, and many felt the 25 was too low, that God was going to do even more than that. So I'm really excited to see how God's going to expand things in this. So would you circle those 7 things along with the things that you're circling? and may you dream big and have great faith and enjoy this week teaching and devotional and your time with God. All right, love you. Here's Mark.
Now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than all we can ask or imagine, according to his power that's at work within us, to him be glory in the church and throughout all generations forever and ever. Amen. That's one of my favorite benedictions. It's one of my favorite verses, Ephesians 3:20. Just when you think you're dreaming big, God will often do something so much bigger and so much better than you can ask or imagine. In the last session, I told you about the 4.7 mile prayer walk that I did all the way around Capitol Hill. The northwest corner is Ebenezer's Coffee House at 2nd and F Street, and it was beyond what we could ask or imagine. But let me tell you about the southeast corner at 8th and M. There's a castle on Capitol Hill that sits right across from the historic Navy Yard, built in 1891 to fix streetcars. I'm actually on the roof of that castle right now because we own it. Give it a few years and it will be our Capitol Hill campus. Now here's the thing. I would not have asked or imagined this 20 years ago. Didn't have a category for a $29.2 million castle. Didn't have a category for a city block. But when you pray like it depends on God and work like it depends on you, God has blessings and categories you can't comprehend. That's the message of Ephesians 3:20. And it's no coincidence that we signed the contract on this castle 18 years to the day from the day we prayed that circle. Here's what I believe. When God does a miracle, the way you steward it is by believing him for even bigger and better miracles. Ebenezer's Coffee House was a huge miracle. But the castle is next level. In a sense, our faith ceiling becomes our faith floor. And that's what we're going to talk about in this session. You show me the size of your dream, and I'll show you the size of your God. It's time to dream big. 100 years ago, there was a famous psychologist named Alfred Adler. When Adler counseled patients, he always began the first session the same way. He would ask the patient to share their earliest memory. After they shared that memory, no matter what it was, Adler would say, "And so life is." Alfred Adler believed that our earliest memories leave a unique and powerful imprint on our souls. They create a baseline and a trend line in our lives. For better or for worse, those early memories become emotional and mental and spiritual touchstones. With that as a backdrop, let me ask the question, what is your earliest memory? My earliest memory is waking up in the middle of the night, unable to breathe. It's a scary thing when you're 3 years old. It was probably 3 or 4 in the morning. I walked into my parents' room and my dad rushed me to the emergency room where I got a shot of epinephrine. As that adrenaline surged through my body, my lungs opened back up. I'd go back home, go back to sleep, and that routine was repeated night after night, week after week. I have no idea how many middle of the night trips we made to the ER, but it was dozens and dozens. My earliest memory is an asthma attack, and so life is. We eventually went to the doctor. I got an inhaler, and for the next 40 years, I took a puff of that inhaler every single day, multiple times a day, with rare exceptions. There aren't 40 days in 40 years that I didn't have to take my inhaler, and I never went anywhere without it. I played basketball in college, but I had an inhaler in my sock. When I went to sleep at night, I'd have an inhaler under my pillow because I never knew when I'd need a puff. Now, let me rewind, and then I'll fast forward. When I was 13 years old, I had an asthma attack. It was too much for my inhaler. I went to the emergency room, ended up in intensive care, and it got so bad that they issued a code blue. I thought I was taking my last breath, and my parents were so desperate that they called the pastor of the church we had just started attending. Bob Schmidgall was at the hospital in 10 minutes. He had no idea that the 13-year-old kid he was praying for would one day be his son-in-law. I got out of the hospital a week later, and a prayer team from Calvary Church paid a visit. We prayed that God would heal my asthma, and God did a miracle. I woke up the next morning, and all the warts on my feet were gone. Not even kidding. Now, at first, I wondered if God had made a mistake. Maybe there were mixed signals somewhere between here and heaven. Couldn't help but wonder if there was someone somewhere who was breathing great, but still had warts on their feet. I was a little confused, but that's when I heard the still small voice of the Holy Spirit. It wasn't an audible voice, but I heard it loud and clear. God said, "Mark, I just wanted you to know that I'm able." And He's not just able. He's able to do immeasurably more than all we can ask or imagine. That promise got in my spirit, and I held on to it for 3 decades. Now let me fast forward. On July 2nd, 2016, I was kicking off a series of sermons at National Community Church titled Mountains Move, and I challenged our church to pray the bravest prayer they could pray. Now, by bravest prayer, I mean the prayer you can barely believe God for because it seems so impossible. It's the prayer you prayed 100 times, but God hasn't answered it the way you wanted. For me, the bravest prayer was that God would heal my asthma. I had prayed that prayer hundreds of times, but I felt like I needed to pray it one more time. One dimension of prayer is talking to God about our problems. But I think there are moments in life when you've got to stop talking to God about your problems and start talking to your problems about God. And that's what I did that day. And I haven't taken an inhaler from that day to this day. God healed my asthma. It's been more than a year, and it's even more unbelievable to me than the castle. Can I challenge you to pray the bravest prayer, to ask one more time, to circle one more time? Here's why I wanted to share that testimony with you. First of all, Revelation 12 says that we overcome by the blood of the Lamb and by the word of our testimony. We've got to share answers to prayer with one another. Why? Because if God did it for me, He can do it for you. If God did it before, He can do it again. Testimony is the way we borrow faith from one another. Testimony turns prayer into a team sport. I honestly don't know why God chose to answer that prayer on July 2nd, 2016. I don't know why He didn't answer it sooner, and that's past my pay grade. But here's what I know for sure. It's too soon to quit praying. It's too soon to give up. In Joshua 6, the people of Israel have crossed the Jordan River. They get to the city of Jericho, and God says, I have delivered Jericho into your hands. Notice the tense. It's past tense, and I love that. In other words, God has already done it. Gratitude is thanking God after it happens. Faith is thanking God before it happens. It's believing that God has already accomplished it in the spiritual realm. Then God gives them a curious command. I bet they wanted to use a battering ram or shoot flaming arrows, but God tells them to march around the city once a day for 6 days, and then on the 7th day to circle it 7 times. It's a picture of persistence. It's a picture of prayer. It's the difference between praying for and praying through, and we'll talk more about that in the next session. But here's a question. What if the Israelites had stopped circling Jericho on day 6? Or widen the lens. What if Elijah had quit praying for rain after the 6th request? What if Naaman had only dipped in the river 6 times? The answer is obvious. The miracle would have been forfeited right before it happened. What promise are you circling? What miracle are you believing God for? It's too soon to quit believing, to quit praying, to quit circling. I'm not sure what you're circling during this series, but it better be bigger than you are. That's how God gets the glory. He does things that are beyond our ability, beyond our resources, so that we can't take credit for it. Let me tell you about one of the defining moments in our history as a church. For our first 5 years, hardly anybody knew we existed. There was nothing spectacular about our growth. In fact, it took 5 years to grow from a core group of 19 people to 250 people. That's when a reporter from the Washington Post heard about our church, and more specifically, the demographics of our church. The fact that we were 80% single 20-something. That was enough of an anomaly to be newsworthy, so she interviewed me and said it might make the religion section. So that morning, August 12, 2001, I walk into Union Station where our church met in the movie theaters. I went to the newsstand, picked up a copy of the paper, flipped through it, found the religion section, and huge letdown because we weren't in it. So I folded it back up, put it back on the newsstand because if we weren't in it, I wasn't going to buy it. That's when I discovered that we had made the front page of the Washington Post Sunday edition. Now, at first, I joked that it must have been a slow news day, but it wasn't. It was God's timing. It was God's favor. And that's what I love about it. Hundreds of people visited our church because of that article. We doubled in size that year, and we never looked back. We're now one church with 8 campuses. We've influenced tens of thousands of people over the last 2 decades. But I love that the catalyst was a moment I can't take credit for. It was God's will, God's way, God's time. That's what we're praying for. That's what we're believing for during these 40 days. Let me tell you 2 things about God that I know for sure. God is bigger than big, and God is closer than close. And those 2 realities shape our prayer life. In Isaiah 55, God likens the difference between our thoughts and his thoughts to the expanse of space. Now that distance is incomprehensible. Astrophysicists have discovered galaxies 15.5 billion light years away. Translation, your best thought on your best day is 15.5 billion light years short of how great and how good God really is. It's called the transcendence of God. Let me flip the coin. There is a theological counterbalance to that bigness, and it's called the immanence of God. Simply put, God is closer than close. Psalm 36 says, his love is meteoric, his loyalty astronomic, his purpose titanic, his verdicts oceanic. Yet in his largeness, nothing gets lost. God is great, not just because nothing is too big. God is great because nothing is too small. He knows the number of hairs on your head. In other words, he cares about every minute detail of your life, and he knows a word before it's even on your tongue. Now, what does that have to do with dreaming big? I said at the outset, you show me the size of your dream, and I'll show you the size of your God. In the words of G.K. Chesterton, how much happier you would be, how much more of you there would be if the hammer of a higher God could smash your small cosmos. By definition, God-sized dreams are beyond our resources, like the Blue Castle, and beyond our ability, like God healing my asthma. That's what gives God the opportunity to show up and show off his power. And nothing will keep you in a posture of prayer like a big dream. So dream big.